want to let everybody know and make it very clear that we are at the All-Star break, and your Philadelphia 76ers are 20-34 as they get ready to take a little bit of a break before they get back into town, get away before the final 28 games of the campaign, and make that push for the playoffs that Daryl Morey was talking about last week. We're here to discuss the first half of the season and some things involving the first half of the season here on the PHLY Sixers Podcast on a Thursday, the first day, again, where we're going to have a stretch of shows without basketball games being played. Welcome, Derek Bodner, Kyle Newbeck. I'm Devon Givens. Bree is here with us on this Thursday as well. As always, good to have you hanging out with us here. Our show, as always, is presented by Bet365. Download the Bet365 app. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And Derek, here we are at this break. And I know we said it a lot last night on the post game.
Maybe not spiritually.
You're absolutely right.
I'm already getting ready for that parade, baby.
Hey, we said it post game last night, though, a lot. I know I referenced it a lot. That just stunned at 54 games in, man. And there's a lot to point at to why they are at 20-34 here. Never expecting for them to be in this particular spot at the All-Star break. But here we are. And we have a lot to get into on this off day as we start this off week, really, of talking about the basketball team in a lot of different ways and looking at what is how we have gotten here by this first half of the season and just how poorly this team has been. I mean, just again, stressing it. 54 games and they have 20 wins, and Joel Embiid has only played, 15 of those games? This has been an unbelievable start to a season where we expected something totally different, and look at where we are right now.
Yeah, no, it's truly unbelievable. And just to drive home a point that Kyle has made repeatedly, they don't do anything well. 22nd in offense, 23rd in defense. They are, I think, the 28th in pace, so they don't even run all that quickly. They are, I think, 23rd in three-point shooting. Like, they don't do anything at a consistently good level.
The pace thing is kind of wild when you consider it. It's normally you could say that's Joel Embiid's fault.
He not slowing you down. Yes.
They're not running when
Can't
they have
blame him.
personnel to run.
They have no identity. They have absolutely no identity. They're a bad rebounding team. When Joel Embiid's in the lineup, they get the line a ton. When he's not, obviously that goes down. They for the most part, don't turn the ball over. That's like the only thing this team does well. It's like a Doug Collins offense.
I was just about to say, remember that was a point of pride for Doug Collins.
Their offense sucked, but they don't turn the ball over, so let's throw a parade.
And I never thought I'd say this fragment of words together. At least Doug Collins' teams defended.
Yeah.
They had that in their wheelhouse. They didn't turn the ball over in part because they were very conservative, right?
Yes.
And that was the reason that the offense wasn't good enough, and they capped their ceiling. But part of the trade-off for not turning the ball over was that was a disciplined, hard-nosed defensive team. And look, there have been some stretches earlier in the season where they were a good defensive team and they turned teams over a lot. But boy,
yeah,
just to be this far into the season and be this rudderless is crazy.
And to be that good, because they're like top 8, I think, in protecting the ball. To be that good at not turning the ball over, mostly because Tyrese Maxey, that's one of his real skills, is to be able to create scoring opportunities both for himself and others without taking risks, without making mistakes. To not turn the ball over and still be an absolute dog poop team in transition defense, that takes special effort and work, or lack of effort and a lack of work. And they've accomplished that.
Yeah, so looking at this one, Kyle, where, again, we've seen over the years where Joel Embiid has been here, and there have been complaints in the past about too much is going his way. There's too much of the basketball funneling through him. He's slowing things down. You just talked about the pace being stagnant and all. But he has only played in, as we look at right now, where this team is. I said 15, but I just want to make sure that it is absolutely correct of where we are. 17 games that he has played of the possible 54.
Well, that's changing. Season. That's changing all of my answers going forward. I'm glad you corrected.
Thank you. 17. Make sure you give him his props, man. But 17 games in, and we just talked about an identity. We knew what the identity at least was offensively, even when Rivers would say, hey, when he's mic'd up at training camp, James Harden, this is not a democracy. We know where the ball is going. Whether you liked it or not, wins were resulted, though, in the end. Defensively, you had an idea again because he's on the back end. And even though Maxey and Harden and Harris are not all that great of defenders, they team defended and they were still top 5, top 7, top 10 for this basketball team. The fact that they do not, and yes, he has only played 17 games. Maxey has played in 46 of the possible 54. And George, these are the ones that really matter, 35 games for the Sixers. The fact that they don't have an identity at this stage of the season is, again, unbelievable. It's something that we wouldn't have even said at all. 4 offenses they should have had. A certain defense, again, even when he's out, because you bring in Andre Drummond, rebounding, securing the basketball. While he's not a defender, he's supposed to be a rebounder. You bring in Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre with Paul George defensively. An identity is supposed to be established at this point. And the fact that it has not been there, the culture is so bad right now surrounding this basketball team. There are just a litany of things that we can get a whiteboard that we had last week and just write so many things here.
Our lights up here might blind out the whiteboards, but yes, we were all over them.
Yeah, there's just a number of things that are problematic with this team with the first half of the season already in the books. And technically, the first half of the season is at 41 games. But the first half with the All-Star break now here, this is really, really ugly to where they are right now tied with the Brooklyn Nets and in the bottom 6 of the entire NBA in terms of record.
It's really staggering that they got here. And I think to me, the most disappointing thing of this season is that outside, we talked about this last night, but outside of Tyrese Maxey, I just don't see people standing up and leading, right? In any discernible way. If you're talking about what the style of the team is, and that's a product of the coach, there's none of that. If you're talking about the other 2 big name stars that are on the team, I have not seen them lead by example, lead with their voices, lead with their presence, lead with their actions. Tyrese is the only guy who we've seen go through some sort of character arc in a positive way this year, right? We were not overly critical of him, but we criticized Tyrese a good bit those first couple of months of the season. Mm-hmm. He was shooting poorly. He wasn't seeing the floor well. I thought his approach as far as how he was attacking and responding to how defenses were playing him were substandard. And what he did was he took that slow start, that bad start as a team, that frankly, he was the one who had to take all the lumps, who had to see all these different coverages, who was getting beat up a little bit and playing 38, 40 minutes a game while guys were out or not playing as much as he was. And he grew from that, right? He used that to say he talked to his people. Sure. He worked with his trainer, and he got in the gym and got away from the floor, quite frankly, and said, this is what I have to change. This is what I have to do better. I'm not going to go boo-hoo and feel sorry for myself. I'm not going to say like it's everybody else's fault. I haven't had enough help. And from about mid-January onward, he's been all-star level Maxey, like one of the best players in the league. During that period, goes on a long run of 25-plus point games, 30-plus point games, and shows all the things that we want to see growth-wise from him. That's what you want to see from everybody in this organization, right? It's not putting your head down. It's not saying, well, it's just the season is the season and we can't do anything about it. It's somebody showing some initiative, showing some reflection, and going out there and doing something about it. So I like, as hard as I've been on Tyrese at times this year, he's the one guy of like the power brokers, I would say, in the organization that I think should walk around with his head held high, that I think, frankly, the whole rest of the organization should be grateful that he's there. Because if they didn't have him having this last month, as negative as we've been, as down as we are on this season, if they didn't have that, we would be up here like just light the whole thing on fire and burn it down to ash. So, credit to him, but it's an indictment of everybody else that he's the only guy that we can say, all right, there's positive things and positive change happening.
Yeah. If you had to sort of summarize it, a real way to summarize the differences, there's a lot of people it feels like are going, why is this happening to me? Tyrese Maxey is going, how can I change this situation?
Yes.
You need more Tyrese Maxeys for sure.
Yeah, and again, Kyle said it. We lit into him a little bit there, and we thought it was deserving of what the performance was that we saw. But he corrected the problem, and he corrected it in a big way, helping out with the 9-3 month of December. And while they were still losing, he was putting up those numbers that Kyle was talking about in the month of January, where he had, Derek, 18 consecutive games of at least 25 points, little turnover numbers to help them get there. As so much so that Sixer fans before weren't, but then eventually said, hey, my guy needs to be in the All-Star game because of the stuff that he is doing here and representing our organization because of how well he has played. And you're right. He needs to walk around and during this All-Star break with his head held high, knowing that he tried to fix whatever problem that they have had. And that's one part of the problem that he tried to fix, and that is just winning, putting the points on the board, leading his team in general, and taking accountability too. When he sat there at that podium and said what he said, and even after the game on the floor, one of the television interviews that he had, and he simply put it, hey, I needed to have that conversation, that rough conversation with my family and friends, and get back to being happy about playing basketball. He's not used to losing. This is his first experience in losing, whether it's collegiately or in the NBA, and he's had to go through this. And for him to, of all of them, come out there and show it, not just talk about it, but go out there and show it and not make excuses. You got to tip your cap to the guy for coming out there as a fifth-year player with a bunch of veterans on his basketball team and be the one to stand there with his head above water and saying, I'm trying to do everything that I can to make sure that we get to where this is not a disappointing season, where we are not talking about tanking the season and all of that. It's not up to him. He's going to go out there and hoop. He's not going to get that message. He's going to go out there and play basketball and try to lead this team to victory. And he's the one that's been available. That's why when that Joel Embiid that thing happened with Kelly Oubre yelling at him for a miscommunication in transition where the game already stunk and there are already a bunch of different plays, and you get that from your supposed leader, that's where, again, frustration after frustration, where we can write so many things down as to how they've gotten to this particular point with this basketball team. This has been a mess. This has been an absolute mess. I remember thinking about, and we'll get to this guy, I remember thinking about Steven Jackson when he was on the show and the whole move of bringing Paul George in, and he points out championship move. Championship
Stack.
move.
I wish you were right, brother, because I wish we were watching a championship caliber team right now instead of this trash.
And he also got on Tobias for essentially, paraphrasing here, not doing anything to impact winning. Compare the stats from Tobias last year and PG8 this year.
All right, folks. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, the question, I'm going to give it to you now. And of course, it's for the guys. The question right off the top, and you can throw them in the chat. We appreciate you doing that. Who are you most frustrated with through the first 54 games of this Sixers season? Who are you most frustrated with from top to bottom? You can name anyone that you want. You can name me for missing the first half of the show yesterday. Whatever you want to do. You can say who you are most frustrated with for the first half of the Sixers season.
For once, Devon, we agree with each other.
Thank you.
I'll explain it why after the break.
Appreciate it. Drop it in the chat. Let us know. We'll start. I'll run a few down and I'll get Derek and Kyle's thoughts. Of course, Bree, if she wants to fire off some takes here because she's frustrated having to watch these games too, we'll get all of that. So who are you most frustrated with for the first half of this basketball season for the Philadelphia 76ers? We'll get into it on the other side. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We discuss all of that and much, much more because this team stinks. It's a total failure right now for the first half of the season. So for you, who are you most frustrated with? We'll do it all when we get back right here on the PHLY Sixers Podcast presented by Bet365.
And guys, even if the Sixers are treating you like trash, you don't need to treat your body that way. What I want you to do is get hooked up with our friends at Factor Meal Kits. It's early February. It's mid-February, right? It's not too late to try to live up to that New Year's resolution. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to live better. I'm going to work out better. Factor Meal Kits help you do that. They are dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes so you can feel right, feel great, no matter what type of life you're living and no matter what life throws at you. One of the things I really love about these Factor meal kits, and we've gotten them before, right? We've gotten the big drop box shipment from our friends at Factor, is that, I mean, the meal variety is good, but you can also prepare them in different ways and they're still just as good, right? Like sometimes you get these pre-prepared meals and they say you can either put it in the oven or you can throw it in the microwave. And sometimes when you throw it in the microwave, it's like, boy, it's just not quite as good. And I really wish I had had the time to sit there and wait for the oven to prepare this. I've eaten my Factor meals out of the microwave. They are just as good. And more importantly, they're healthy for me. They taste good and they allow me to live the crazy, hectic lifestyle we live, coming into the show, going to games, doing all that. They have all kinds of options for you. They have Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, where they really load those meals up, or Keto. You can lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals based on a controlled clinical trial, although results will vary depending on diet and exercise. They give you a fighting chance to live up to that New Year's resolution. I want you to eat smart with Factor. So get started at factormeals.com/Sixers50off and use code Sixers50off to get 50% off of your first box plus free shipping. That's code Sixers50off at factormeals.com/Sixers50off to get, as you can tell, 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
I think I might leave my Factor in the freezer here since we're here so late. You know, I get hungry. It might leave them there. I do get hungry. All right, got to tell you about.
Wait, does that mean you're going to stop bringing in treats?
I'll bring the treats into the candy.
As long as you keep bringing that.
No, we got to be healthy. It's Factor, baby.
That is true. That is true. All right, we got to tell you about, you got to be healthy, right? You got to be able to play basketball and use both hands. Paul George, I'm talking to you. If you're looking for a little extra help during the break and you need to go get a new split or somehow tie the fingers together, tape them together, well, may not just be tape. It could be something different. Or even in the off season when you have to get some surgery on that finger or whatever it might be. Rothman Orthopedics, they have you covered, whether it's from the hip, knee, spine, you name it, shoulder, elbow, foot, ankle, hands, and wrists, sports medicine. Rothman Orthopedics has you covered. Rothman proudly serves dozens of communities across Pennsylvania and New Jersey with 30-plus convenient offices, urgent cares, and walk-in centers. I can get you in there pretty quickly with my connection with Rothman Orthopedics, and the patients will find the full spectrum of the orthopedic care there at Rothman Orthopedics, from the diagnosis to the discharge. They provide their patients with every service and procedure necessary, such as x-rays, orthotics and bracing, MRIs, physical therapy, and much more. For more than 50 years, Rothman has participated in thousands of groundbreaking research and clinical trials with the goal of advancing knowledge, developing treatments, and improving outcomes for the benefit of their patients. I being one of them, I stand proudly here in front of you, or sit here in front of you and tell you about them because of my knee and my Achilles that needed to be redone. And they got it done, and I'm still running, I'm playing ball, trying to knock these guys out and pop a shot here in the office. And I'm happy to say that because of Rothman Orthopedics, specializing in orthopedics. And you visit rothmanortho.com/PHLY to learn more and make an appointment today. Welcome back to the PHLY Sixers Podcast here on a Thursday. And before we get to your responses and Derek and Kyle's questions, Bree and I had to ask all of you, starting with Derek and Kyle, your first thought when you see this. Woj in the summer, 3 a.m.
What up to Woj, by the way? Enjoying his time with St. Bonaventure.
Dropping this tweet. The first thing, Derek, that comes to mind, 4 years, $212 million with the Philadelphia 76ers. Here on February 13th, going back to that tweet, the first thing that comes to your mind.
I thought Joe finally had a supporting cast capable of competing deep into the playoffs. I thought this was it.
I thought, boy, I'm sure glad I pre-wrote a story because it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I really want to go to sleep. No, I'm with Derek, right? Like I understood and I even agreed with some of the skepticism about Paul, but I still thought it was a risk worth taking.
Sure.
And if you go back and look at a lot of the options, like KCP is a big one that we know was floated as a potential alternative. He's not having a great season down in Orlando. We talked about OG Anunoby. And I think OG, if you had been able to convince him to leave New York and sign here, although I'm skeptical.
No, that was a foregone conclusion.
That was a foregone conclusion. Basically,
you would have had to trade for him. And I would have had interest trading for him, but that ship's sailed.
But look, he's had a very good season and has been able to stay healthy, which is really the more important thing for him. With hindsight, if you could make that happen somehow, I think that's certainly a better option than what they've gotten out of Paul. But a lot of the other options are just like, like, are you materially better short or long term? I don't know. Obviously, with hindsight, it's like almost anything else would have been better rather than anchoring yourself to this contract for the next 4 years. So it's crazy what however many months it's been since then can do to change your opinion.
OG, and I'm pretty sure if you go back in the summer, it will back it up. OG was the only one where I'm like, he's the guy that I would have taken over Paul, just because of youth, just because of what he can do defensively, just because of his off-ball shooting. But you would have had to trade for him last December, was it? December?
Yeah, that was. I know it was well before the deadline. It was either late December or early January, one or the other.
And by the way, people hated the idea of giving OG 40, 45 million a year.
Correct.
Like a lot of people in the chat hated that.
I still don't know that I would want him on that contract.
I was about to say, paying attention to the Knicks a little bit that I have to, and then you like some of the people that say things, they are not happy sometimes with him.
Oh, sure.
With that
You're
contract.
never going to be when you're giving that kind of money to a non-superstar.
Yeah, I think the difference with him is he is such a transformative defensive player, especially if you can think about a lot of the lineups they've had to play this year, right? Where it's like Yabu is the 5, or you're dealing with Bona or whoever it is. If you have OG as a flex piece all over the floor, I think that ends up making a big difference for a lot of the. But again, I agree with Derek. That was not one that once you got the free agency, he was always going to go back to New York. That was, you would have had to commit to him in December of last year and trade real resources to get him.
Yep. All right. So the question going into the break was, Kyle, who are you most frustrated with this 20-34 start?
I think it's Nick Nurse. And that's not to say that I'm not frustrated with other people. We'll talk about Daryl. We'll talk about Joel and Paul. But Nurse, I think, has been not what was advertised to us, not what I think anyone expected him to be coming in. I think if we would have laid out a path of like, the Sixers are going to fail with the Nurse as the head coach, it's because guys are injured, but it's also maybe he's just being too experimental. Maybe he's throwing too many things at the wall and he's all over the place and they're just trying stuff and nothing is sticking. Instead, they have just been a vanilla team. This is not, you can almost set your watch to exactly what they're going to do. Like, this lineup's on the floor, zone defense. They're trying to make a furious rally at the end of a game. They're going to full court press the other team. And that worked a little bit at the end of that Brooklyn game on Wednesday night. The offense looks the same, no matter who's on the floor, no matter who's available for a given game. It's a lot of side-to-side dribble handoffs. It's basically 2 or 3 staple plays that they try to run out of. And that's fine, right? When one of those staple plays is a Maxey Embiid pick and roll, get him the ball at the elbow, and the mid-range is working. But Joel's only played 17 games, and he's only finished 15 of them, so it's even lower than that. There has been no discernible plan, as we've said many times, to organize the offense without Embiid, to try to draw up a plan for, this is how we're going to manufacture points that's not just relying on Tyrese Maxey to be a star. And I've said it many times. I think fundamentally, I don't disagree with the idea that if you're a 3-star type of team, if you've got enough talent, that you can play a simple style of offense. In fact, I think that's something that is why Doc Rivers constantly has top 10 offenses with his teams, is because they have their stuff that they run. It's relatively simple. You keep guys with consistent spacing. The complaint would be it's a little too static, but everyone knows what you're running. The guys who are in charge and in control have the luxury, the freedom to kind of run the offense as they please. But this is a group that is just crying out for more structure, more plays, more creativity. And Derek and I have said this a bunch of times recently. Nick has gotten a reputation as a defensive coach. He came into the league, and the entire reason he was hired as Raptors head coach, was promoted from being an assistant on Casey's staff to head coach, was because of his offensive reputation. That was the reputation he brought into the league. This guy is an X's and O's and offensive wizard that he's going to move things around. I just don't see any of that. And I understand it's a lot tougher to be a X's and O's wizard when you're limited with the personnel. But there has been no point in the last full year where I have felt good about what they're running on offense and what he's showing with the structure and system. And so he's been my biggest disappointment this season, because unlike most of the other guys, unlike the players, you can't sit there and say, well, his body is just failing him, right? Mm-hmm. It's no hey, Nick Nurse is injured. He didn't suffer a concussion and he can't draw up plays. This is just, he hasn't been able to figure out a solution. And so that's why he's at the top of my list.
What about you, Derek?
So it's not you, even though I tease it.
I appreciate it.
It's me. It's me for buying into this team, for believing that something good would happen, for getting all of your hopes up. I am very, very disappointed in myself. No, look, Joel Embiid is the biggest reason that they're where they're at. You were never going to feel good about this team if Joel is injured. They're never going to be in a great spot if Joel is finishing 15 games. I don't actually blame Joe as much as I think most people do, because I do think his body is breaking down. Mm-hmm. And I actually think he's done a pretty good job of trying to, change his habits a little bit in terms of getting himself into the best shape he's been at really since he broke his foot. I give him some credit for that. A lot has gone wrong. And it doesn't mean he's handled everything well. It just means that a lot of what is happening to him is his body breaking down or not reacting well to that injury. Same thing with Paul. I actually, as frustrating as he has been here over the last 2 weeks since coming back, his January, he was starting to turn it around. I do think the pinky is a torn tendon in the pinky. I'm going to repeat that torn tendon just because it makes it sound a little more like it actually is a legitimate injury. I do think that's impacting him. That doesn't absolve him of the way that he has played and the effort he has not given on defense, which is really where I think my primary frustration has been over the last few games. But I think he was starting to play marginally better. I agree with Kyle in that Nurse isn't the reason that they're at the bottom of the league, which is still wild to say out loud. But he has been the most disappointing just because you expected so much more. In no way did I think this team with this personnel would be one of the 7 worst defenses in the league and trending in the wrong direction, even after getting Paul George and Joel Embiid back. It has not been good enough. It has not been consistent enough. It has not been creative enough. You have not gotten your players on the same page. And is it tough? Yes. But they also, they came into the season with a bunch of wings who can get after it defensively. Obviously, a lot of them, the injuries didn't just stop with Joel Embiid and Paul George. They went to Caleb Martin, they went to KJ Martin, they went to all that. But some of the lineup, the choices he has made to put on the floor have been disastrous, and he's just stuck with it time and time again. So is he the biggest reason or the biggest problem? No. Is he the biggest disappointment? Yeah, probably.
Yeah. And it's going to be a clean sweep because I've been, again, when Rivers left and the vacancy was there and Nick Nurse was available, he was the guy for me right away. I was like, all right, he's not the greatest, but he's good. And he's won. He knows how to win. He knows how to make adjustments. He knows how to get a little creative, as we've talked about a ton here with his coaching style. And we just haven't seen it. Yes, the personnel has been a little clunky the first 2 years or a year and a half because injuries have really hit the roster with Embiid in particular. Then when Caleb Martin was here, he missed a lot of time. And Paul George with the knees and now the finger. Maxey missing about 8-9 games because of the little injury, not the little injury, but the injury that he had. And even last season when he had to miss the month, Tyrese Maxey, because of his foot, injuries have been there. But when you do start to see a season just unraveling the way that it is, you need a leader out there. We just talked about Tyrese Maxey and his leadership ability to bounce back the way that he did. And the leader has to be Nick Nurse. And a lot of times we talk to you guys in the chat, and one thing that has been a little concerning too is all right, it's like he's taking out all his frustration on the officials on stuff that doesn't even matter a lot of times. Where you're looking at that and you're saying, all right, why are you biting at, you know what you need to do? You need to be lighting these guys up in the huddle.
That's always been him. Him and Joel Embiid used to get into it because they were both like yelling about calls in the middle of playoff series.
Yeah. But you know what? You need that leadership. And the one thing, and we brought this up last night, at least I did to the guys, was the one thing about Rivers, when they were shorthanded, he found a way.
Figured it out.
They competed. They got after it. They had an identity. When Embiid was even off the floor.
Remember when they beat, it was, I believe, KD, Kyrie, James Harden, Nets. Granted, they're a bit of a mess. With like Shake Milton and a bunch of backups.
Yeah.
Those are games that right now we just go into it and say automatically like, that game's a loss. We don't even think about it.
But I can even give Nurse credit from a season ago when he dealt with them. When they played the Boston Celtics that one night when Pat Beverly is going off for like 25 and Marcus Morris is dropping 27, and these guys are 30 plus years of age. Last year, they were giving that effort. This, which had me encouraged going into this one, knowing that, hey, Embiid's going to miss a couple of games. And you know what? From what I saw in some of those, he's going to have these guys prepared and have them ready to go. They're going to compete. This year, sure, it's not Beverly and it's not Morris, and maybe the mentality is not the same with Eric Gordon or whomever else you want to talk about coming off the bench, Andre Drummond, but they went out there and competed. We complained about a different thing about how they lost, but in games like that, there was not a lot to complain about because they shouldn't have been in them, and they were in them, and they gave themselves a chance. And it wasn't just that Boston game. There were a number of games like that. So for me, with the Nurse part, it's they needed a leader again when all of this stuff is going the way that it is. We talk about the ramping up. That thing is angling down, and it has been angling down all season long.
That ramp is going right off a cliff.
It is. That ramp, they needed some
Evil
adjustments, man. They need some adjustments with that ramp. Call in the engineer to fix it. He's supposed to be the engineer to fix it, Derek, and he's not doing it this season. Whether it's the message not just being received, whatever it is, he's the one in charge, and it's not happening, man. It is really not. So a clean sweep here for all of us.
It really
with the Nick Nurse piece.
It's wild that we went for a clean sweep because, to be clear, we didn't
We're going to
discuss
get to
this.
the other
We
guys.
didn't discuss this at all.
No, we didn't.
And also to be clear, if there are 5 people, 6 because I'll include Josh Harris, 6 people in the organization that truly matter, right? Josh, Daryl, Nick, and your I'm very quotation mark here, big 3 in Embiid, Maxey, and PG. You only have confidence in one of them right now. 1 out of 6. That's not going to cut it.
That is not good.
That
is not good. We'll get to more. We'll read some of yours. We have some super chats in there as well as we talk about the most disappointed, frustrated person within the organization that has you shaking your head, pulling your hair out as this first season is just unbelievably ugly for the start of the season at 20-34 with 54 games in as we sit here at the All-Star break. It's the PHLY Sixers Podcast as Derek shakes his head right here, presented by Bet365.
All right, first up, we want to tell you about TrueMark Financial because if you're like me, some of that holiday shopping might be leaving you with a little bit of a credit card balance that's weighing you down.
Need the money for Valentine's Day tomorrow. Last minute gifts. Look at that.
We have another sponsor for that. What if you could pay it off faster and with 0 interest until 2026? Because TrueMark Financial is offering 0 interest on balance transfers for 12 months, so all your payments can go towards reducing your balance, not just covering that interest. Transfer your existing balance from another institution to TrueMark Financial Visa credit card and take advantage of this amazing offer. But hurry up because you have to apply by February 28th, 2025. That's just a little more than 2 weeks away. Whether you're interested in earning rewards, cash back, or simply prefer a low rate for everyday purchases, with TrueMark Financial, you can choose a credit card that best fits your financial needs. Visit TrueMark.com/compare for full details and to apply today. TrueMark Financial, federally insured by the NCUA, equal opportunity lender. Terms and conditions apply. All loans are subject to approval. 3% balance transfer fees apply. Standard rates apply after the promotional rate.
And it's the All-Star break for Philadelphia. They don't have any more games, but there are 5 games left in the first half of the season. They are tonight, and there's a pretty good slate of games to wager on, and you can do so with our presenting sponsor right here at Bet365, who has over 90 million users worldwide. They pioneered live in-game betting, and for the basketball games tonight, you have early payouts across not just the NBA, but the NFL, NHL, and MLB. When those two get back up, the NFL and MLB, it's right there. Pitchers and catchers already there for you. NHL and the NBA early payout offers right now for the NHL. You bet 365 early payout offer. You're a winner if your team gains a 3-goal lead with an instant payout on straight bets and parlay selections marked as winners. And with basketball, the early payout offer, team goes up by 20 points with an instant payout on straight bets and parlay selections marked as winners. And if I look at the games tonight, a team that could go up by 20 in their particular game, let's say the LA Clippers with the Utah Jazz, they might have a chance to do so with that 20-point early payout offer for NBA. You could do all of that right there at Bet365. And with that breaking news of Bet365, new customers can get $100 in bonus bets when you bet $5 win or lose. Here's what you do. You sign up, use code PHLY365, deposit 10, and place a $5 bet to get $100 in bonus bets. If your bet wins or loses, bonus bets can be used on the spread, totals, player props, futures, if you want to bet right now on your football team to repeat, or more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 plus and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Welcome back to the PHLY Sixers Podcast, presented by Bet365 here on this Thursday as we talk about the Sixers' disappointing first half of the season. Kyle, started off with you again as we talk about Nick Nurse, and it's a clean sweep there. Where would you go to next? Who has the second most maybe ire, from how things have played out?
I think I'm going to go Daryl Morey next. And I don't think it's going to be for the reasons that most of the people in this chat expect, because I still think it was a narrow window or a tough needle to thread in terms of getting the exact combination of guys. If you're not going to do Paul George, and certainly with hindsight, you wouldn't do Paul George for 4 years, sure. $212 million. And the extension thing with Embiid, which is going to be it is the looming problem for the organization. If he can't get better, they are just sunk because they can't trade him, and it'll be hard to build a real team. I think what I'm most disappointed in is that because you went after Paul George, because you had Joel Embiid, and you knew inherently going into the year, you're built around two guys in their 30s who are going to miss time. There is absolutely no way in the world you can go into the year with so many old, unathletic, slow players on the rest of the roster, right? I think the deadline shift to say we want to get younger, we want to get more athletic, like that's a focus for the team moving forward. That's all well and good. I don't know how you can be this deep into Joel Embiid's career, having seen where Paul George is at in terms of just his age, how he has declined athletically, and say, you know what we need? A bunch of little guards. And it's very easy for me to sit here and say this and say it's not hindsight. This is not me playing Monday morning quarterback. I spent 2 months of the summer saying, stop signing guys who are shorter than me, right? Like, I can't take it anymore. Go sign a guy. And if you're going to sign guys who are my height or in the guard range height, get some athletes, right? Markelle Fultz has had, injury problems or whatever. Put him on the roster, even if he can't shoot. Lonnie Walker has been playing in Lithuania, right? I would have signed him at any point between now and July if he's willing. Clearly, he's willing to take a minimum. He played on an Exhibit 10 for the Celtics in the preseason. So you can't tell me there's not an opportunity to get a guy like that on the roster. I think it's just a brutal misunderstanding of what you need. And I tweeted the other night, I was like, wow, look what happens when you put guys who can dribble and pass on the floor with Joel Embiid. And obviously he melts down at the end of the game. It doesn't matter. But Jared Butler comes in right away, scores 15 points. Quentin Grimes comes in right away, makes a difference because, hey, shocker, someone who can put the ball on the floor and get to the rim when you're playing next to a 7-foot tall guy who draws double teams and gets attention coming to him is going to have it easy. The one signing that's like a true free agent that they brought in from out of the organization, I don't blame them for in terms of the role players, is Caleb. Like, I think he had a really unfortunate injury season. Frankly, I would have tried to keep him around over the long term because I think he's somebody that in a normal year with normal health luck and is still in the middle of his, prime physical years, that he'll turn that around and he'll be a useful piece. And you send him out in the trade. I get that you have to create value somehow, but like the dearth of depth that you have in terms of athletes at this point and for most of the year was just pathetic. And then I'll throw Josh Harris into this mix too. You gave up KJ Martin at the deadline, who, like, I don't care about whether he has to pay the tax. As Derek has laid out many times, they didn't gain any flexibility this season by ducking the tax. And you got rid of, if you're trying to be younger and more athletic, he was the best athlete on the roster. So that is what pisses me off the most about how Daryl and the front office have handled this year and handled last offseason. If you want to sign Paul George, okay, like, we're going to see how that plays out, and it's played out really poorly. But the supporting plan just doesn't make any sense on paper, and it's something we hammered at the time. It looks even worse in hindsight.
Yeah. No, the if you're trying to build around Maxey and you're going, okay, we know Joe's going to miss time. We pretty much canceled him out of back-to-backs from the start of the season. So bare minimum, he was missing 15, 20 games. So we have to build something around Maxey. The exact wrong archetype that you would go for is Kyle Lowry and Reggie Jackson. And then your other...
And Eric Gordon to a lesser extent.
And Gordon too, although at least he shot well for a couple weeks after getting a dental surgery, which find that dental surgeon, hire him, see if he can do any kind of practice. But no, those two, and then Drummond, like you lose a lot of points for using the last bit, because Drummond was on a legitimate, like, I think it was $5 million. Last bit of their cap space, targeting him, and he's been an abject disaster. I will say, only because I think Daryl is who I would have gone to, and I don't want to have a clean sweep as well. I'm going to nominate Josh Harris for this, and not even for the KJ Martin part, but mistakes in the past have consequences. When you barf all over yourself for 4 years straight and basically punt on having to actually do your due diligence on a hire and going and enabling something like the collaborative, if you make enough mistakes over time, you're eventually going to be desperate. And I think the Sixers have basically been in an act of desperation, in a mode of desperation, since Ben Simmons had that moment in the playoffs.
Yep.
Every move since then has been trying to desperately cobble something together to, get something built for the tail end of Joel Embiid's prime. And when you act out of desperation, you are going to be prone to mistakes. That doesn't absolve Daryl Morey of the mistakes that he has made. That doesn't absolve Joel Embiid for not stepping up and becoming the leader. That doesn't absolve Embiid for maybe not having kind of habits that he needs to age gracefully into the second half of his prime, or the end of his, certainly the end of his prime. But they made so many mistakes. And because of that, some of the cushion you had to withstand a setback is gone, and you're desperate. And the moment that Ben Simmons turtled up in the playoffs, this team has not, they've been acting out of desperation.
Man, you brought that one back. Yeah, that was the one right there.
Trigger warning.
That's the one right there. That is a tough one. The one on Caleb too. That's especially when if you pivot the way you do and move KJ Martin for nothing, where before, as Derek pointed out, way before they signed him, and as soon as they signed him, probably going to get a player back if the season was flip-flopped and they were, 34-20? And we're looking at that.
Dream world.
But again, their whole mindset changes. If you're doing that, then why not just keep Caleb Martin? And if you believe that he is going to be healthy, like Grimes, but why not save him and let him get healthy? Let Embiid get healthy. Let George get healthy from all the injuries that they're sustaining, and not move them at all. The season is what the season is, and just let it be. And then you just keep Caleb Martin and let that happen. I'll go a different route, and I will go player. I will go Embiid is what Embiid is, and even Paul George is what Paul George is.
I have some thoughts on Joel, and we'll probably end with him, I would imagine.
I'll go with George here because when you sign that contract and you come in, it's unfortunate that he does get the 2 injuries with his knee, with the bone bruise to start things off. One in training camp and preseason, and then one pretty quickly there in the regular season where he re-aggravated the same knee. Can't fault him for that. The pinky, can't fault him for that. He didn't tear a tendon in his finger on purpose. But what I can is that much of what we discussed last night after the game, where there are a lot of games, not last night, where we just simply felt like the shooting hasn't been there, the effort defensively has been there, but where you are supposed to be still a knockdown shooter, and Tyrese Maxey needs help, and he needs help badly. We're not looking to Kelly Oubre to fill that role or to Justin Edwards or Ricky Council to fill that role. Sure, you are a willing passer, which is fantastic, but you also need to be that willing scorer that we've known you to be as that two-way player to give you 20 points that Kyle was begging for last night. But even before last night, Tyrese Maxey was begging for you to give him that type of support out there on the floor and just simply hasn't. So while he did have that good stretch where he was averaging close to 20 and he looked pretty good, in totality, the 30-plus games that he's been out there on the floor, fighting back from the knee, you give him, again, a little bit of grace there because that's a difficult injury to play through. But when he was healthy for whatever short time that he was, it's just been so frustrating in watching him play basketball and try to, from the Phoenix game, right away when he got on the floor and Maxey was cooking, and he takes the ball out of his hands because he had to have a moment instead of, let's get this.
Where has that aggression been the rest of the year?
Exactly. So
the one time you should fade into the background. You're like, I got this, y'all.
Exactly. So for me, it has been the George signing because it's just been a disappointing start to the season. And he has not been the supporter that Maxey has needed when Embiid has been out to be that 1-2 punch that we saw just a handful of times. The Knicks game, what he had, 29 or 30 in that one, the first Knicks game at home. Then there was another game where he and Maxey had 29 and 30 combined. We came back and we had a show the next day and said 1-2 punch as that because it was like, okay, they're starting to get it together. He goes from 30 or 29 all the way down to about 14, and his shooting percentage, his efficiency is not there, and it's just not a good enough stat line where we don't want to look at him. I saw Randy say 12 was right. We're going to miss him. Randy, I can't get with you on that one, Randy Briggs. I love you commenting in the chat and sharing all your thoughts, but I can't get with you because I think we all know we saw 12 for 5 years. The sixth season of 12, we know what you're getting.
Yeah.
And right now, what you're getting from at a bigger price here or a similar price from when 12 was here is the same type of numbers and the same type of.
Hey, 12 is Jared Butler. Put some respect on his name.
My bad, Jared Butler. But just the passiveness that we're seeing out of George right now, outside of the pinky part, that is really frustrating for me to give him my second nominee outside of Nurse, of the one that has frustrated me the most with this season to start things off. What up, Randy? I see you in there, but can't go with
Which
that
Randy? There are two.
Randy Briggs.
Randy Briggs and
Randy
Randy
Briggs.
Rubar.
My fault, Randy Rubar. I see you in there too. What up, Randy?
Thank you to both our Randys.
Both of you Randys. But yeah, I can't get with you on Tobias in that one because we saw that one before. And the record still might be 20 and 34 right now. He would have played all 54 games, but I think the results would have been the same.
He would have played in all 54, but you still would have only noticed him about 20, which is about the same thing as Paul.
Yeah.
And that's why it would have been 20.
I said my piece about Paul George last night. I don't have any Paul George rants left in me right now.
I had to go 12 there.
Do you have any Paul George thoughts you want to share, Derek? Or?
Yeah, I mean, look,
he's like telling you to hit the like button, though. Go hit the like button. Thank you. I
don't know if that's going to help with Paul George being there. That's like a no.
I definitely think the finger is hurting him and impacting his play
today.
To me, since he came back.
Yes.
To me, the defense has just been unacceptable, though. and Nick tried to talk up I agree his defense in the second half was better last night, but his first half, he looked checked out. I don't know if it's maybe he's not confident making plays on the ball because he doesn't want to get the hand hit. I don't know what's going on, but you need to bring something. And since coming back, he has more often than not just been a part of the problem rather than any kind of solution on either end.
And again, I'm not going to fault him if he has to sit out a couple of games because that is difficult to play with.
And sit out.
But you're out there.
Yeah.
And we keep saying that. You're out there. So you have to impact it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
They have to make the shots. I agree. Your teammates have to make the shot when you make those good passes. They do. But you also still have to find a way to put some points on the board with your own shooting, whether it's getting to the free throw line or just living with that mid-range that you have there. You have to do that, man. And he's just not doing it.
All right. So we had to end this conversation with Joel, right? Because he's the proverbial elephant in the room. He's, I think, the biggest name out of everybody, and that includes ownership, whoever. I'm not mad that Joel has been hurt, right? I will say it 100 times. I've never criticized people whose bodies are giving out on them. And I do think fans will probably not agree with this. I think he's tried to take better care of himself. I have talked to people about, like, so is Derek and Devon, about what he's trying to do to give himself the best chance to play. And I don't think that it's working. That's not the issue that I have with him, that he's not available. Like, him not being available is the biggest reason that they're at where they're at. The biggest issue that I have with Joel is that he is in his 30s, and I do not think that he has shown an understanding or the proper growth that you want from a guy who is supposed to lead this team. And I think the moment they had that team meeting in Miami, a lot of people, like, the thing that came out of it was Tyrese Maxey called out Joel because he's not on time. That in itself, Joel getting called out for something is not bad, right? He was not the only one to get yelled at. The issue that I had with what happened in that meeting and the aftermath is that he had to try to make excuses for it afterward, that he felt the need in the media to be like, well, it was really only one time and it was this. I do not care, right? If you reverse those roles, if they had that locker room meeting and Joel Embiid called out Tyrese Maxey and said, you're not on time. This is an alternative universe where this would basically never happen. But it's a version of the universe where that happens. Tyrese Maxey that we know, if he got asked about it, would say, yeah, I'm not doing everything I can to try to make this team better. I don't make excuses for it. It's my fault. I have to be better. There's no soft shoeing. There's no excuse making. There's no, oh, we need to hear the bigger context. It's, I wasn't a good enough professional. And it's the reason why when people see him doing handstands at practice, when they see him doing goofy things in front of the cameras, around the other guys, and he's not playing for a month, it's really difficult, even for people who are diehard supporters of this team, who have ridden hard for this guy for his entire career, to look at him and say, that guy gets it. That guy understands and wants to do anything that it takes to get better. And it very well could just be an optics thing, right? Like, I know Joel personally. We all do, from covering this team for so long. I think in his heart of hearts, he wants to do the right things. He wants to win above the individual accolades, above, everything running through him. I don't think he's an inherently selfish person, but I do think that he's immature, and I do think that he truly does not understand. He has to take things more seriously than he has. Otherwise, this is what your career is going to be. This is what your legacy will be in Philadelphia. You're an outstanding talent. You're a guy who won an MVP. You are someone who, in terms of what you showed at your best, is up there with any Sixers player of, like, the last 50 years, 40 years, however you want to cut off that time frame. But you're going to be viewed as a loser, as a guy who can't get it done.
Yep.
And you are not helping yourself. You have to do everything off the court, on the court, in the media, private, public, whatever it is, to give yourself the best chance. And I think he's doing maybe 80% of that, 85, 90. But the difference between the inner circle guys, the guys who drive titles, the guys who are really winners, is that extra 15, extra 10%. And that's the reason why they're at where they're at. It's not the injuries. It's not the other stuff. It's that he would rather put an excuse out there. He'd rather deflect. He'd rather try to paint a bigger picture than just say, I got to do better, put his head down and figure it out.
And the thing that stands out is from training camp and media day in particular, where he said all those things about, he called Daryl Morey after the season was over last year in the playoffs and said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to win. And that is part of whatever it takes. And when you also have, Derek, an organization across the street, they all support each other, right? And they go to their games, the Eagles do. The Eagles go to the Sixers games. Sixers players go to their games. Joel knows most of them for being here as long as he has with some of those players. He doesn't have to be a maniac like Jalen Hurts is in the approach that he has to go about it.
Every
about
quote is like a fortune cookie.
Right. He doesn't have to be a maniac like that. But you can see how they do it, how they go about it. He's known Brandon Graham for a long time. Brandon Graham is a talker, but he's a mature guy that goes out there and knows how to win. Lane Johnson has dealt with things in his career. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champion when he's dealt with the mental health issues that he's been open about, right? The same thing when some of the other Eagles players. And for that to be right across the street, the relationships that are there within the community, the player community that they have, their fraternity, and for you still not to understand that last 20% of what Kyle is talking about, that is troubling. And when you say it in the preseason that I'm going to do everything that I have, I lost the 25 pounds, I'm ready to go. Then we get to training camp. Yeah, he's not going to play in any of these practices, no preseason games, of course. And then he's still not ready for the start of the season. And looking back on it, it's, as you laid out a lot, that's where it all began. That's where it started. And that's where we are right now. Let's get to the super chats that we do have here, because we have a few that we want to throw up here. And that's from Davon, a.k.a. Schoolboy Beats. Nick got a rep for defense for beating a depleted Golden State Warriors team.
I don't think that's entirely fair. As we've said, the most impressive Nick Nurse season was the year after the title.
Yeah.
The title obviously makes everything look better.
And by the way, you watched that whole season?
Yeah.
They were good.
Yeah, no.
Yes.
And they knew Kawhi Leonard was going to miss games, and they were still good.
Yes.
They were a good basketball team. Davon also continues, I blame players last, top down, starting with Harris.
Well, I think it's all because look, when they win, if they win a title, the owner's going to want a lot of the credit. The GM's going to want credit. The coach is going to want the credit. If you want the credit when things go well, you have to take a lot of the blame when things go poorly, especially when there are direct things we can tie back to your decision-making. So, yeah.
Boy, he better get it right because he starts winning again with that Commanders team. Boy.
Well, they're set up pretty well.
They are set up pretty well, and they're going to spend some money this offseason, and Sixer fans are going to be ticked off of how that one goes. All right, folks, that'll do it for us on a Thursday. We got to do, though,
tomorrow.
Legendary and world famous. I'm making all these things up. Roll call on a Thursday.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging out, including both Randys.
Both
Randy
Randys.
Briggs and Randy Rhubarb.
What up, Randys?
Aaron, thank you,
What up,
my
Aaron?
friend, who comes in with the Arnold Schwarzenegger voice. You lack discipline. I think that's Kindergarten Cop, I want to say that's from.
You certainly did it in an Arnold-esque way.
Yeah.
So
It's a good movie.
Iko. Oh,
Kindergarten Cop.
we're going to have an Arnold conversation one day. I'm one of the biggest Schwarzenegger
didn't we have an Arnold
proponents.
soundboard up for one show?
The amount of prank calls my buddies and I made in high school is just disgusting. Thank you to Igavini.
You got to do the chopper, man.
To
You can't
boot.
go through all that.
I don't
Not
have
do
the voice
chopper,
today.
man.
Thank you to Bootzilla.
Boots.
Thank you to Yams Colangelo. Thank you to Greeny Green.
Green. Better takes than Greeny.
Thank you to Mom's grandchildren who
Hey.
said it was a great informative show. Thank you, Mom.
Gotta
Love
give
that.
Mom some gold
Thank you to
standard shirts.
Jess. Thank you to my girl
Hey, Jess.
Winona,
Hey,
who I
Nona.
saw is prepping to come in for the parade
Oh,
tomorrow.
Nona's here for the parade.
Here we go.
Okay.
Nona, maybe we'll see you around Elaine Bruno
That's a lot
checking
of
in.
people.
Jack Reacher, Remo K.
Jack Reacher loved the movie.
Maurice Chandler, Marcus Blackstock,
What up,
Jesse
Mark?
Bond. We had Davon on the super chats.
2 super chats. What up?
We had SB Cole, Kyle Wright.
Kyle. What up, Wright?
We got darkness. That's
Turn the
all
lights
my
down.
voice has left. Guys, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you get notifications when we go live. Hit the thumbs up button to say thank you, super producer Bree. We're out. Goodbye.
See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.